The cold winter had stolen the warmth from their home, and with it, the laughter that once filled the air. John, once the heart of their family, had become a shadow of the man he used to be, lost in the silence of his own despair. But just when it seemed that hope had slipped beyond their reach, a strange visitor appeared, an unlikely savior with bright green feathers and a voice that cut through the darkness. A parrot, who would remind them that even in the depths of sorrow, there is always a spark of light waiting to be found. In a small, quiet town nestled between rolling hills and endless stretches of green fields, the Lee family had always been the picture of happiness. Emma, a mother of two, and her husband John, had built a life that was filled with laughter, shared dreams, and the warmth of a loving home. Their children, Lily and Ben, had grown up surrounded by the kind of nurturing environment that many only dream of, one filled with joy, security, and a sense of unshakable love. But like all stories, life has its seasons, and one fateful winter changed everything for them. It was early December when John, a man who had always been strong and steady, began to withdraw. He was quiet at the dinner table, less engaged with the family's conversations, and had trouble sleeping. At first, Emma thought it was just the stress of work. He had been spending long hours at the office, often staying late to finish projects. But as the weeks went by, John's mood became darker, his silence deeper. He stopped attending family outings, and the spark that once lit his eyes began to dim. Maybe he's just tired, Emma whispered to herself, trying to push away the growing concern that gnawed at her. But even in her most optimistic moments, she couldn't ignore the distance that seemed to widen between them. Then came the phone call. John had been let go from his job. It wasn't just a career loss. It was an identity loss. John had built his life around his work. For years, he had poured his heart into his job, believing that his success would ensure stability for his family. The blow hit him harder than he could have ever imagined. The once bustling home now echoed with emptiness as John retreated further into his own grief. Emma, though supportive, didn't know how to reach him. Her own heart ached with the weight of watching her husband slip into a quiet despair, one that she couldn't seem to lift. For days their conversations were few, and the laughter that had once filled their home was replaced by a suffocating silence. Lily and Ben, though young, could sense the tension. They no longer asked for their father's attention, no longer tried to share their little triumphs with him. And in that silence, Emma's spirit began to wither as well. One cold January morning, when the snow lay thick on the ground, Emma was walking to the mailbox when she saw something strange in the yard. A flash of green and yellow caught her eye, and she froze for a moment. There, perched on the snow-covered fence, was a parrot. Its vivid feathers were a stark contrast to the muted winter landscape, and it looked directly at her with eyes that seemed to hold more wisdom than she could comprehend. Without thinking, Emma took a few steps toward it. The parrot cocked its head, watching her closely, and then squawked a greeting. "Hello, human." Emma froze in shock. Had she imagined it? But the bird spoke again. "Hello, human," it repeated, this time with a little more enthusiasm. "Are you talking to me?" Emma whispered, half expecting the bird to fly away. But it didn't. Instead, it flapped its wings once and landed on the ground, hopping closer to her. "Yes," the parrot said, flapping its wings as if confirming the connection. "I'm here." Emma could only stare, unsure of what to make of this bizarre encounter. The bird, as if sensing her uncertainty, hopped even closer, gently landing on her outstretched arm. It nuzzled its beak against her hand, a soft gesture that felt strangely comforting. She couldn't help but laugh nervously. But the laughter was different from the hollow silence that had dominated her life in recent weeks. It was lighter, like a small piece of hope had suddenly emerged from the fog of despair. That evening, Emma cautiously introduced the parrot to John. At first, he didn't even acknowledge the bird, sitting in his usual chair with his eyes distant as if the world outside of his own sorrow no longer mattered. But the parrot, unbothered by the silence, walked right up to him, puffed its chest out and squawked, "Hey you, wake up!" John blinked, momentarily startled, then glared at the parrot in disbelief. "Did you just—" "Yes," the parrot replied, flapping its wings excitedly. "You need to wake up, your family needs you." Emma watched, unsure of what to expect. She had never seen her husband react to anything with so much as a flicker of interest in months. But there was something about this strange creature that seemed to reach him in ways no one else could. The parrot hopped onto John's knee and looked him directly in the eye. "I see the sadness. I see it in your heart. But it doesn't have to be like this." For the first time in a long while, John's eyes softened, and for a fleeting moment, Emma thought she saw a spark of recognition, like the man she had married was finally starting to resurface beneath the layers of pain and silence. Days passed, and the parrot, whom they named Echo, became a fixture in the Lee household. It wasn't long before it began to perform little tricks, singing catchy tunes, mimicking the sounds of the doorbell, and even telling jokes that made Ben and Lily giggle uncontrollably. But more than that, Echo seemed to know exactly when John needed to be roused from his isolation. Whenever he would retreat into himself, the parrot would suddenly appear, often delivering a few words of encouragement that John couldn't ignore. One evening, as John sat in front of the fireplace, staring at the flames, Echo flew onto the armrest of his chair. The room was quiet, save for the crackling fire. Emma had stepped out for a moment to get a few groceries, leaving John and the children to their own devices. "You're not alone," Echo said softly, its voice gentle yet firm. John let out a sigh, his gaze never leaving the fire. "I feel like I am," he muttered. "That's because you believe you are," the parrot responded, its eyes locking with his. "But you're not. Look around. You have a family who loves you. You just have to remember that." John's lips trembled as if the words were just on the edge of his understanding, but his heart wasn't ready to accept them. Echo wasn't finished. It hopped onto his lap and flapped its wings once as if to shake him out of his stupor. "You've been trying to carry this alone," Echo continued. "But that's not how it works. You don't have to do this on your own. Not anymore." A long pause hung in the air. Then, almost imperceptibly, John's shoulders relaxed. His fingers, which had been tightly gripping the armrest, loosened. For the first time in what felt like forever, he took a deep breath, filling his lungs with air that wasn't weighed down by the invisible burden he had been carrying. When Emma returned, she found John sitting in the same chair. But there was something different in his expression. His eyes were not as distant as before. They were clearer, more focused. Echo was perched contentedly on his shoulder, preening his feathers as if they had shared an understanding. Over the following weeks, John slowly began to regain his sense of self. He still struggled with the loss of his job, but the weight of his despair didn't crush him as it once had. With Echo's help, he learned to open up, to talk about his fears and frustrations instead of burying them deep inside. Slowly, he reconnected with his family, his wife, his children, and the joy that had once defined their home began to return. In the presence of Echo, the Lee family rediscovered something they had lost: hope. The parrot had reminded them all that no matter how dark the days seemed, the possibility of light was always just around the corner. It had been the spark that reignited their bonds, and in its own simple way, Echo had saved their spirits. As spring came to the small town, the Lee family once again found themselves laughing together, sharing meals and dreaming of the future. Echo, perched proudly on its perch, was more than just a pet. It was a reminder that no matter how difficult life may get, sometimes, all it takes is a small, colorful bird with a big heart to help people see the light again. And so, as the days grew warmer and the flowers began to bloom, the Lee family lived with a renewed sense of hope, forever grateful to the parrot that had saved their spirits one wing flap at a time. If you enjoyed this heartwarming story of hope, healing, and the unspoken bond between humans and animals, don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends. Every bit of support helps us bring more inspiring tales to life. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of the power of love and connection, no matter how unexpected. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.